Work session for October 5th. Before we get started, that item is the Greeley Terry Ranch Project and Charter Amendment Initiative.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. There's been a lot going on, as I think we've all heard, with water in Greeley. A lot of, I think, positive growth for the region and good things happening in terms of water supply. One of those issues that has quite a long tail on it that I'm sure feels a lot longer to the gentleman to my right is the Terry Ranch Water Project, which is a new, largely storage, but also some raw water, if I'm not wrong, resource for Greeley that's had lots of conversation and attention in the. And then we also know that there are a couple of ballot measures on the city of Greeley ballots for November, addressing potential charter changes that would affect the way Greeley Water works in terms of how its relationships with partners when it comes to raw water and how it does a lot of its important business. So those really are kind of separate issues, but we have an action-packed work session for you tonight because we are joined by Adam Jokers to my right, who is the Deputy Director
for Water
Resources with the City of Greeley. And then also Mr. Harold Evans, who is the longtime Chair of the Greeley Water and Sewer Board. So Mr. Jokers will talk about the ranch project and give us kind of information overview on that, and if there might be any implications for Evans. And then Mr. Evans will talk about the ballot measures and how those might affect Greeley's municipal partners if they were to pass. Those are some of the things that I know questions I've heard about. So with that, I will turn it over to Adam and Harold.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mayor and council members, for inviting us here. Welcome to the Water Board members as well. I'm here to talk about the Terry Ranch project, which Greeley has purchased. So happy to give you an overview of this exciting project. Harold's going to discuss the charter amendments. Staff is not offering any opinions on these ballot initiatives because they're going to a vote. So Terry Ranch project, before jumping into that, just a little bit to set the stage. Greeley receives its water from 4 different basins: the Poudre, Big Thompson, Laramie, and Colorado River through the Colorado Big Thompson project. Many of these same basins are used by Evans. We treat our water at 2 different water treatment plants, one at Boyd Lake and one at Bellevue. And then we deliver it to our customers and into the Evans system through over 600 miles of pipe. Just stepping back the big picture, for Northern Colorado, for Greeley, and including Evans, we're one of the fastest growing regions in the state. We've seen exceptional population growth over the past several decades, and that will continue. Greeley expects to more than double in population within the next 30, 40 years. We're 110,000 currently, and we are planning our water supply even further than 2050, 2065 to be over. We have a finite water supply. All the native water that's here is all we're going to get. And this region has been water short since the 1930s. That's why the Colorado Big Thompson project was built, to supplement the limited water supplies we have here. We remain a major agricultural economy. Greeley has over 10,000 direct agricultural jobs in the city that supports our economy, and there are many other secondary and tertiary agricultural jobs that feed into our economy. We're facing some pretty unique and challenging times when it comes to water. Climate change will impact our supplies. Our supplies are going to be more variable, very likely. Droughts can become more severe, and we're seeing this on the west slope in the Colorado River, This year was the first time ever that a shortage the river. Next year, Arizona will be taking a significant cut in the amount of water they receive from the Colorado River. These are unprecedented times. And then we're seeing, as I'm sure you're aware, more frequent and larger wildfires. The largest wildfire in Colorado history burned in the Poudre River watershed last year, and the second largest fire in Colorado history burned on the Colorado River side, affecting the CBT supplies. We're going to continue to see these kind of impacts. It impairs our water quality, and we're unable to take water from the river when that occurs. So now onto the Terry Ranch project. The Terry Ranch project is a water supply and storage project that Greeley is pursuing to meet some of those challenges I just spoke about. Now, for a long time, Greeley was pursuing an enlargement of Milton Seaman Reservoir, an existing reservoir on a tributary. Because of the challenges of receiving federal permits, which many of us have faced with large reservoir projects, for example, Halligan, NISP, it became more and more apparent that we were unlikely to receive those permits. So we started looking at alternatives, and Terry Ranch was one of those alternatives. Terry Ranch, the ranch itself, is located in northwest Weld County, up along the Colorado border, just east of I-25. We're not interested necessarily in the ranch itself, but the water that underlies the ranch. Under the ranch is a large pocket of groundwater. It's been decreed, meaning there's a private property right, just like a water right, to 1.2 million acre feet of water, which is a large amount of water. That's a non-renewable source, and Greeley wouldn't be for the ability to store water. We can inject water underground and store it, and this acts like just an underground reservoir. Because of the size of the reservoir, this could really meet our needs for generations to come. I say 1.2 million acre feet, hard to wrap your mind around how big that is. This diagram hopefully puts it in context. An acre foot is 325,851 gallons. It's like putting a foot of water on a football field. And this diagram to the right shows in that little red, does this have a pointer? Sure. Yeah, well, most of you can't see that. I'm pointing over my shoulder.
You can point that.
It's the one I'm looking. This little red dot is Greeley's average annual demand. 25,000 acre feet is how much our community consumes. And the ranch volume of 1.2 million acre feet. So it's a lot of water is the bottom line. So how it would work, we would pump water out of the ground through a well field. We would treat that water through a small water treatment plant, not like the treatment plants we have today, which are very big and have a lot of settling basins. This is a packaged plant, a modular plant, some big tanks bolted together. And then we would deliver it through a new 30-mile pipeline that would run from the ranch south and connect into our existing pipelines, our existing transmission lines just north of Windsor. When we want to store water, we would first treat that water at our Bellevue water treatment plant because water injected underground needs to be treated first. That's a rule of the EPA. We'd first treat it. We'd again take it through those existing pipelines. That way we're able to use our existing infrastructure, and then we pump it north to the ranch and inject it underground. It's important to note Terry Ranch is for droughts. This is not our day in and day out supply. We're going to continue to be a surface water system. Terry Ranch is for droughts. Whenever our surface water runs low, we'll turn to groundwater to fill in the gaps. And we're going to operate this as a sustainable source. So the water we take out, we're going to refill through injection. This is very different than a lot of conjunctive use systems like in the Denver area where they're mainly groundwater and they fill in the gaps with surface supplies. This is completely opposite. We're a surface supply system that fills in our gaps during droughts with groundwater. Underground storage is definitely new to Greeley, and You don't see this in northern Colorado, but it's very common throughout the West and even on the East Coast. Albuquerque, Phoenix, Tucson, cities in California and in Florida all use underground storage. It's called Aquifer storage and recovery. And it's an old technology. It's very proven. Some of the positives are that it has very few environmental impacts because all the infrastructure is underground, and therefore we don't need the same kind of permits. We can start building this, and we are going to start building this next year. We don't have to wait for all these permits. There's also no evaporation because the water's underground. What we had been planning on doing, the enlargement of Milton Seaman Reservoir, would have evaporated enough water to supply 3,000 homes in Greeley. This has no evaporation. The downsides are it requires pumping and additional treatment, so the operational costs are higher. So as of April, when we closed, we purchased a non-tributary decree, the rights to the water. We acquired the right to use the aquifer under the land for storage. We have a blanket surface easement so that we can develop the infrastructure on the land. We bought a lease to the land board, the school land, in between its checkerboarded land ownership. We have a lease to that water, 5 existing wells, full municipal grade wells, and through a negotiated purchase agreement, we received $125 million from the seller to begin constructing the infrastructure. I'll talk about that just a bit. So this is a unique transaction. It is complicated, but it is very much in Greeley's advantage. We did not pay cash for this water, this project. Instead, we created raw water credits, and we issued those to the seller. And these raw water credits are redeemable to meet our raw water dedication requirements, and that's the water or the cash due of developers at the time of development. Evans is much the same way. When a new developer wants to build a subdivision, they have to either bring water and dedicate it to the city, or we created these credits which developers can then turn into us, and we would issue them a water tap. Those credits are owned by the seller, which is named Wingfoot Water Resources. The Wingfoot will sell those to developers. That's how Wingfoot makes their money. We issued 12,121 of these credits. Each of these credits is worth 1 acre-foot. And again, those were issued to Wingfoot in payment for the project. We're going to continue to accept cash in addition to these credits, in addition to water. And we set that cash rate every year, our cash in lieu rate. So effectively, Greeley sets the price ceiling for these credits. Even though there's going to be a secondary market where these credits are traded, bought and sold, we set the price ceiling. Bottom line for us, what this means is we're not going to collect future cash in lieu revenue. So we're foregoing future revenue. Important to realize that that cash in lieu revenue was specifically for building a water supply project. In this case, we get the water supply project up front and we forego revenue on the back end. This reduces our risk substantially. Typically, in a water transaction, if we were building a reservoir, we would issue very large bonds, and then we'd rely on that future fee collection to pay off that debt. So we're relying on uncertain future revenue to pay off past debt. It's risky. If you're counting on a lot of growth, it's not as risky, but we all know that development kind of comes in fits and spurts. So it's like, not sure when you're going to be paying your mortgage if you don't know when your next paycheck's coming in. In this way, that risk is pushed onto the seller. Wingfoot now has that risk of collecting money from future fees. On this, we performed extensive diligence. We spent about 8-9 months, and we spent a little over $3 million to make sure that this was going to be a safe, reliable, and affordable water supply project. We looked at the environmental conditions on the ranch. We looked at the condition of the rock, hydrogeology, geochemistry. A lot of our diligence was focused on the water quality and the treatability of the water. We did a full preliminary design and cost estimate. And then importantly, we took all their results and we turned them over to national experts and we said, what do you think? It's a third-party review because we wanted to be, very sure that this was going to be a safe and reliable project. Water quality was our foremost concern. We wanted to make sure this was safe. This has also received a lot of attention in the community. We collected over 7,000 water quality, at over 575 compounds. We looked at water quality from all corners of the ranch. We drilled 2 additional wells just to get more data on water quality. And overall, this water quality is excellent. Currently, if we pumped the water, blended it, added chlorine, it would meet all Safe Drinking Water Act regulations. You can drink it straight out of the ground. Got a lot of attention because there is trace amounts of uranium present in the water. Uranium is not very common. It's not specific to this, this project. Uranium comes from the rocks, it's naturally occurring in the rocks across the western U.S. In fact, the Poudre and the Big Thompson have low levels of uranium in the water as well, lower than what Terry Ranch is, but uranium can be treated. It's treated commonly in other communities all across the U.S. Very simple process where water is passed over a media, much like a sand filter or the water softener you may have in your house. The media grabs onto the uranium and takes it out of the water. Very simple process. And just to prove that this works, we actually hauled up a water treatment plant, pilot plant, and ran it for 30 days on the water just to make sure there was not going to be any issue. And it worked flawlessly. So we are going to remove all uranium to non-detectable levels. One of the biggest reasons we're pursuing Terry Ranch as opposed to other alternatives is that it's about half the cost of our next best alternative. You don't have to look at the numbers in detail, but Terry Ranch is about half the cost of the Milton Seaman alternative. And more importantly than that, we can phase the cost of Terry Ranch. We don't have to build a big dam all at once. We can build a pipeline slowly over many years, and that's what we plan to do. We plan to take about the next to build the backbone infrastructure. That spreads out the cost and keeps rates low. It will be more expensive to operate, but again, because this is a drought supply and we're only operating it on the very driest years, we're not going to see those higher operational costs reflected in our rates because we're only seeing those costs in certain years. It's about 10% more expensive than our existing void treatment plant and about 60% more expensive once we start both withdrawing and injecting. The bottom line, we closed on Terry Ranch because it diversifies our system. By having groundwater and surface water, we have a more redundant water supply system. It's less expensive and it will maintain low water rates for us. And excellent source of water, so it makes sense to pursue. You want to do questions at the end?
Quick questions? I would do questions now.
Okay. Yes.
What do you do with it after you remove the uranium? Do they haul it off to a storage facility, or?
So we're going to contract with a third party that makes and hauls and handles all the media, so our staff never has to deal with it. And there's a few different vendors. Some of them landfill it in special landfills. Some of it actually reprocess the uranium and reuse it.
I'm going to see if we have.
So I've got several. Where does the injected water come from?
It's from the Poudre River, our various Poudre River rights, as well as our Trans-Basin Colorado River water.
On drought years?
Correct.
Let's see. And does Greeley plan on selling any of this water in time of drought then?
This was developed as a Greeley project, and we have no immediate plans to sell any of this to.
If it really. And then this is location, and then we can't get the rights to.
Well, luckily this is all within Weld County. The water originates and is transmitted and is used all within Weld County. And so we don't expect to have the same kind of 1041 permitting issues that Thornton has.
Private farmer.
Well, we're in the easement acquisition phase currently. We are discussing and we'll be purchasing easements from folks within the next few months, next year. But there's not Thornton ran into permitting issues with the county, with Larimer County, and with Weld County, which they overruled. We're not going to have to go through those permitting processes.
We do also, as a last resort, have eminent domain capabilities. We finished up a new 60-inch diameter pipeline coming from Bellevue to just south of Windsor about 5 years ago, and we had 2 property owners that we had to go to a condemnation on. We would prefer not to, but we have a lot of experience in acquiring these, and you look between, once you get north of Highway 14, it's basically short grass prairie and cactus, and so we don't anticipate extensive problems, but there's always going to be 1 or 2. I mean, that's just the nature of it. But the good thing is it's all in Weld County, and we've had conversations with the Weld County commissioners, and they think this is a good project. So it's a great question, but we purposely tried to find something to stay out of Larimer County.
I just wanted to add, so on the injection aspect, when there's drought, is there a specific amount that you're going to inject into it, or is there a specific cap that you would take away, in essence, that you can't go any more than X amount?
No, it really depends on, in wet years we're going to be injecting, and it really depends on how much extra wet water we have available and how much capacity we have in our treatment plant to push that through.
I think to the council member's question, there's a timing opportunity too, where you're not injecting and taking the same year, because in a drought you need the water. So that's your question.
Right.
So then
Right.
after the drought, you put the water back.
Because that also can cause an issue as well. But then again, like you said, there's no, in essence, cap on it. So you can inject whatever quantity or utilize whatever quantity. I was just curious how that would affect.
There is a decree, there's a cap in the decree that we can only use 1% of the volume per year. So we are limited to 12,121 acre feet a year, 1/10 of it. However, that amount rolls over if you don't use it. And this decree happened in 2017, and none of that water has been used, so it just keeps accumulating. So practically, there will not be a cap on how much we can use.
Now that is for the withdrawal phase. There's no cap on the injection phase, and the hydrogeologists tell us that in addition to the 1.2 million acre feet that has water in it now, there could be as much as another 500,000 acre feet of pore space that we could inject in. If you notice, that diagram had a bubble on it. So actually there's significant additional storage capacity there, probably more storage capacity than we would have water we could get up there out of the footer. So there is a cap on the withdrawal, but not on the injection.
So it's just a back and forth. I was just kind of curious also because when you withdraw water, I mean, I guess you're supplying with the injection, which makes sense. So then in essence, there will always be water. But, well, because, I mean, aquifers tend to, over time, also refill themselves.
They do. This one is very deep. It starts at about 200 feet down, and has very little natural recharge. It's what we call non-tributary, meaning it's really not connected to any surface water. And so it has very little recharge, very little outflow. That's good. Non-tributary aquifers are not regulated like a lot of the well pumping that you may see around Evans and Greeley. You can use that water anywhere for anything, and we will reuse this water indirectly for our non-potable irrigation throughout the city.
Like in essence, not like it's not go outside factors.
Very little.
Very little.
Mhm.
Okay. I know you also mentioned that you did studies over X amount of time for the water quality and the treatability. Did any other third party create these types of studies aside from you?
Sure. So the seller actually did a variety of water quality studies before we even got involved, and then we had our consultants do a variety of studies, and so we did get to have kind of two different groups collecting water quality data.
And did those match?
They did.
And we also had at the end the peer review by outside independent experts, and they reviewed the data. They didn't do any testing, but they looked at all the test data, which was most of the testing was done by outside independent laboratories rather than with the consultants. So I think there was plenty of different people that looked at it to give us a high degree of confidence that this will be good quality water.
But we didn't do any of the lab analyses ourselves.
Thanks for the presentation. Like that. I have definitely. What's it going to cost us? That's what I want to know.
Sure.
You guys.
Well, so this, well, first, it's already gone through. We purchased this. Our agreements with Evans is that we're your wholesale water treatment provider, right? This is a water supply development. It doesn't affect the cost to treat water. And so this should have no impact on the rate that Evans pays Greeley to receive treated water.
You share in some of Greeley's capital costs that are factored into our rates, but we'll be having conversations with Greeley, to ensure that that those costs, just per Adam's comments, are probably excluded from our rate.
Right. My understanding is the capital costs are related to our treatment side and transmission side.
Right. And that this kind of pipeline would be excluded to the extent it doesn't benefit Evans.
That's my understanding. Thank you.
I think that's very far ahead of something.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Even though I'm chairman of the City of Greeley Water and Sewer Board, I'm here as a private citizen. I'm also a citizen volunteer on our water board, as I'll talk a little bit later. We have two charter amendments that have been placed on the City of Greeley ballot in November by petition. That's what I'd like to visit with you about tonight. First, let's look at how do we currently do business. We have a city council that is elected by the citizens. That city council appoints the 7 members of the Greeley Water and Sewer Board that are citizen volunteers. We then, in cooperation with our staff, will look at projects, hire consultants, and do the normal day-to-day business of the water department. We also have an advisory duty back to the city council where we recommend a budget to the council and a long-term capital improvement project program to the council. But basically, this is our current operation under the Home Rule Charter. All functions of government are with the city council, as I'm sure they are with this group as well. Our Home Rule Charter was adopted in 19. One of the main objectives was to remove the water function from the political arena. In 1973, the sewer function was added. Originally, it was only the water board. Again, we have 7 citizen volunteers who are appointed by council for 5-year terms. We're the only board and commission that does not have term limits. We also have, as members of our board, as ex officio members, the mayor, the city manager, and the finance director. It's been that way since the original charter in 1958. I find that as a policymaker to be very, very helpful, that to have those 3 top officials from the city, one the mayor and the manager and the finance director, as part of our board. Even though they don't vote, they're valuable members of our board, and I think we make better decisions because we have that kind of a setup. Currently, our current board has a little over 100 years of experience on the board. I'm in my 25th year on the board, which means I've been appointed by 5 different councils. Duties and authorities. This is spelled out in the charter. The board is to acquire, develop, convey, lease, and protect water and sewer assets, supplies, and facilities. Any sale or exchange of water rights or assets has to be approved by city council. The board does not have that authority. We are required by charter to set minimum water and sewer rates that include all operation and maintenance, debt service, and depreciation. The charter also says that the city council may increase those minimum rates, but they cannot decrease them. I mentioned earlier we have regular advisory duties in that we recommend a annual budget to the city manager who incorporates that in his budget that goes forth to council. And then the charter requires us to submit a five-year long-range capital improvement plan to council. We actually present a 10-year plan, and we work on a rolling 10-year capital improvements plan each year. The proposed charter amendments, called Save Greeley Water, and I hadn't thought about this until somebody mentioned it today, but they asked if they had anything to do with Save the Pooter, which is a group over in Fort Collins. So now I think maybe they kind of played on that group's name. But anyway, it's called Save Greeley Water. They're proposing to change the charter, which in essence is our local constitution. These charter amendments require redundant engineering studies for any of the projects that are affected by the charter changes, and they would require we think a special election, simply from a timing standpoint. It says that for these items, they have to be taken to a vote, and prior to the vote, they have to have a redundant engineering study and have to be available for public input for 60 days. It would impact any leases that are in excess of 5 years in duration, trades, exchanges. It would prevent the use of groundwater and reuse wastewater without a vote of the people. And this includes for irrigation purposes. We currently have, I think, 10 different locations that we use well water in Greeley for irrigation. The Lynn Grove Cemetery is an example. Island Grove Park is an example. If these were to pass without going to a vote, we would not be able to use groundwater. We'd have to use treated potable water to irrigate those. This is initial diagram I showed you, except it shows the additional steps. We would have to have redundant outside engineering evaluation of all the work we've done. then would have to go to an election, either a special election or a regular election. And then it could create significant disruption to our water delivery. We also think there's a potential for significant legal challenges. The Save Greeley water people right now are saying that, oh, well, you could do this every 2 years at a regular election, that you could wait for 2 years. We had 3 items on our August board meeting that would have had to go into an election if these charter changes had been approved. 2 of them were intergovernmental agreements with other cities or water districts, and 1 was the acquisition of a significant block of water supply and storage company water from a large farm operation that has told us that if we hadn't been able to expeditiously move to closing, they would have not done business with Greeley. So it would have that acquisition of that water would not have happened. Proposed charter arrangements. Historically, all charter changes have been done through a council-appointed charter commission. The last one was in 2001. I happened to be on that charter commission. This is never, to our knowledge, has never been done in the state of Colorado to have a charter change done by petition. And if these 2 have passed, no other cities in Colorado would make this water decisions this way. What are the implications? It would change the way we've conducted our business for the last 60 plus years. None of the previous charter changes have impacted the basic authority and duties of the water board as spelled out originally in 1958. There's been things like water was added. The board was changed from 5 to 7 citizen volunteers. Qualifying as an enterprise zone was added, and adding that we could do executive sessions in accordance with Colorado state law. So those are the type of changes we've had in the charters for water and sewer, but it has not affected our basic operational mandates. We think it would put us at a competitive disadvantage in acquiring additional water rights, and we are looking to acquire additional surface water rights over and above the Cherry Ranch project. The Cherry Ranch project is a storage project. We, in essence, took an above-ground storage bucket, an enlargement of a semen reservoir, and replaced it with a below-ground storage bucket. So Cherry Ranch is a storage project. We've worked very hard to try to maintain the agricultural economy around Greeley. The reason that when you acquire water, it takes you a long time to put it into your portfolio. And you've got to be acquiring water ahead of time. We're acquiring water now that will, through the next 5 or 6 decades. So we want to try to keep as many farms in operation as we can. That's why when we acquire water, we lease it back to the farmers. We've been doing this not only since 1990 when we acquired a pretty significant block of Greeley Loveland water west of Greeley, but ironically in 1958, when the Colorado Big Thompson project first came online, Greeley had committed for 15,000 units of CBT. Actually, in 1939 was when they signed the agreement. When it was first delivered in 1958, there was only like 4,000 acre feet was delivered the first year out of CBT of the 15,000. Greeley could only use 500 acre feet of that. The rest of it they leased out to 3 ditch companies. The big thing, another thing, is the use of groundwater. And they say recycled wastewater. We don't do any direct recycled wastewater. Given the location of where our wastewater treatment plant is and where our Poudre ponds are on 35th Avenue, we can use our wholly consumable effluent out of our wastewater treatment plant by exchange, a paper exchange up through the river. And ultimately, changing the way we do business is going to increase cost and water rates. And I think that this will have a direct impact probably on potentially your rates as our overall cost of operation is going to go up. This is an interesting slide in that, again, this was done by petition. The petition says that the ballot will require the decisions to be approved by a majority vote of the registered electors of Greeley. That's the language in the petition. This means that of the 64,000 registered electors in Greeley, we would have to have an excess of 32,000 vote positive for any of the items we put on the ballot. This is not to change the charter. This is the items that are in those two actions for us to lease water for greater than 5 years, for us to use groundwater would have to go to a vote. The problem here is that over the last 5 general elections, we've averaged a 45% turnout. So this essentially ensures that we would never be able to get anything passed on those issues that are addressed by the charter changes. We spent a lot of time, at least I have, trying to decide what was the motivation. Why does this group called Save Greeley Water have such a dislike for groundwater? Part of it is they seem to be completely convinced that they could get a permit from the Corps of Engineers to enlarge Mountain Seaman Reservoir, that the board and staff were not capable of doing that, even though we spent 15 years and $19 million in the permitting process. They had water quality concerns. They don't think we can treat the water successfully. I think there's an underlying opposition to growth. For some reason, they, again, have criticism not only of the staff, the board, and also our city council. Just recently we found that 2 of the organizers of Save Greeley Water, one is running for mayor and one's running for council at large. And so we think there may be a significant political motivation. Our city charter established the quasi-independent water board to help keep water out of politics. If we have to vote on all these issues, it will, by definition, politicize the decisions. If you go to a vote, you're going to have some on one side and some on the other side. The right hand, the kind of keep Greeley water out of politics, is an ad from the 1941 Greeley Tribune, where 25 local businessmen took out this ad during a council election because there apparently was a group that was going to try to make water a political issue. Just quickly, some fact checks. They claim we're planning to sell our mountain water and facilities to other cities. That's absolutely not true. They say that the Cherry Ranch water is contaminated and too expensive. Adam has addressed that very well. I've never seen the amount of due diligence that we did on the Cherry Ranch project for any other project. It had to be right. This is a game changer, and we had to get it right. They're saying the aquifer storage won't work. It works in many other places throughout the United States, and we're convinced that it will. This is a bit of a, I guess I wouldn't say a touchy situation, but one you could discuss. Is, do we have a representative form of government or a direct election form of government? Do we have a direct democracy or a representative form of government? Under the charter, Greeley has a representative form of government with its city council, and it's a mayor-council form of government from an administrative standpoint. You can argue both sides of that. They say that we could very easily get a federal permit for Seaman Reservoir, and I've been in many meetings with the Corps of Engineers, and I'm convinced that that would be highly unlikely, and that's primarily due to the environmental impacts that an enlarged Seaman Reservoir would have. Inundation of several miles of live stream, inundation of wetland, inundation of Preble's metal jumping mouse habitat, and cutting off an elk migration habitat. Those are the things that the Corps of Engineers has to look at by statute when they're approving a project. To close, and this comes from that ad in the Greeley Tribune in 19. A growing city has growing needs. Look ahead and plan for others as others have planned for you. We call upon every citizen of Greeley to keep Greeley's water supply out of politics. If you're interested, we do have there's a citizens committee that's been established to oppose these charter changes. We have a website called defendgreeleywater.com. Has a lot of information on it. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about our charter changes. And obviously, you can tell I'm biased. After 25 years with the Greeley Water and Sewer Board, I can't help it. I mean, I've got a lot of time and effort in this operation. So if I seem to be a real partisan, you'll understand why.
Water and sewer board, start with you gentlemen. You guys have any questions? Council questions or comments?
Well, when I toured, Colorado Water, the Parker facility, they had invited some of the other surrounding towns, I think, join in with the project, and then turned them down because they thought they could build their own. And then when they were getting to the completion phase of the smaller project that they were building, they already had approval for a larger thing from the EPA. Those towns, all of a sudden, I think it was Albert and I can't remember the other one. They came and were begging the Water and Sewer Board in Parker to jump in on that project because they found out that it's like we spent $19 million over 15 years trying to get it done. Almost impossible in some cases to get that done anymore with all the environmental concerns.
I would say I'm on the Water and Sewer Board. City, I think.
We appreciate that and thanks for the opportunity to not only tell you about Terry writing project and also the efforts that we're doing to try to make sure that these ballot issues don't get passed.
We'd be happy to take you. Right now, it doesn't look like much. It's a short grass prairie with a lot of buffalo or bison.
Stay that way, right?
And even after it's built,
Clearly not now. I mean, once like infrastructure, if all goes well for you all, gets created and whatnot, it'll be interesting.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Guys, thank you for being here again, as always.
Yeah.
We move on. Next item on the agenda is the 2022 operating and capital budget overview. And while your staff's coming, Jim, you do it.
Sure will. Thanks, Mayor. It's budget time, and this is feels like our first step because we're presenting the entire budget, but it's actually not because this council has been involved. This is actually our third presentation on the budget this year. The council heard a report on our revenue forecast and our local economy probably a month or so ago, so that you could have a handle on the revenue base, which is really the foundation, of course, for what we can spend in our budget. Then at your last council meeting, you heard an overview of a recommended capital plan for the budget and had some discussion about capital projects and capital priorities. So tonight the emphasis is on the operating budget. And with that, I'll just mention that we do have many of our managers here tonight, several of them, and we'll all be here to answer any questions council should have following the presentation. So with that, I'll ask our finance director, Jackie Trout, to start the overview.
Thank you. Good evening. I mentioned we'll spend some significant time on the general fund and what's kind of our guiding principles for the creation of the 2022 budget. We will talk about enterprise funds, hit on some of the capital projects that we did already discuss at the previous meeting, as well as looking at next steps and where we are with the budget process. So our guiding principles for 2022 are multifaceted, but I think it's important for us to also recognize the significant progress that we've made in the current year budget. So we started the 2021 year budget in a time where we had made significant reductions in operating costs. We were holding staff vacant positions, trying to do what we could to weather the economic uncertainty that we were in the middle of. And so council's direction during the year was to secure the workforce. We spent a significant amount of money investing in our staff in terms of public works and public safety employees, getting some market adjustments going, investing in deferred maintenance projects, getting capital projects back on track as well. So I think that was really great progress that helped to set us to where we are for the 2022 budget. The three areas that are highlighted in this year's budget are revenue stabilization. So I think this is a really great one. We've spent a significant amount of time looking at the revenues of the city and all the funds, all the various sources, ensuring that we could come up with the best, most accurate projections we could, not only to have good numbers, but to also stabilize that 5-year plan. So we wanted to eliminate some of the peaks and valleys, making sure that we had a stable operating revenue base in all 5 years of our plans and their budget. You'll see significant improvements or investment in our capital projects, asset management included. We've gone through and identified those highest priority capital projects. Council's given good direction on those. Those are included in the budget, as well as needs from a department side as far as staffing and operational needs. So we'll talk tonight significant requests from departments in terms of staff positions and costs that are needed for departments to be able to operate at their highest capacity. So we'll talk about what's included in the budget and also what recommendations are still on the table, not yet funded in the 22 budget, that will be future needs for the city.
I'll jump in again here and steal some of the thunder because I think this is an important slide, some of the big picture aspects of the budget. As is our practice, the budget that you're seeing tonight is balanced over the 5-year forecast period, meaning that our current revenues are adequate to cover our projected expenditures that you'll be seeing. Our current service levels are continued in this budget with most services, with many of the requests that we have, many of our services restored to the pre-pandemic levels, or that level that was originally budgeted for 2020. Want to point out, since council is engaged in ongoing discussions with our fire district about the appropriate level of financial support there, this budget assumes that or does not indicate any change in the historical method or model for funding. So the way we've budgeted that in the past is just based on an inflation factor from the prior year. We understand that model or that approach could be changing, but for purposes of the budget, we wanted to leave it as it has been, so that we're not showing any predetermined outcome there. Finally, council's heard about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds. That's federal money that the city is expecting, actually at this point, about $5.3 million. We've only brought to you a very small amount of that money to use. Most of that money will likely be used, and the federal guidelines and requirements are for use in the utility areas, so mostly water and sewer, likely for us. There is a component of the money and the guidelines that talks about revenue recapture for the year 2020, and that if there's an ability to quantify what that is, we can use that amount of money to restore services or make progress on things that we weren't able to do in 2020. The guidance on that is still a little sticky. We're not sure where that's going to come down. Cities are starting to draw conclusions on that, but at this point, we want to let you know we have not allocated that money. That will be a separate city council discussion for how we'll budget that ARPA money. We're still waiting for some final guidance from the Federal Treasury Department and also from the state on especially whether any of that money can be used as broadly as we hope. So with that, I'll turn back over to Jackie for the overview.
And there's a time limit on when that money and those funds have to be used.
Yes, they have to be basically encumbered or about spent by the end of 2024. If it's invested in a project that won't be fully spent, we have until the end of 2026 to do so.
We have some time.
Here you'll see a general fund revenue total graph just showing some trending of where we've been in the general funds on the revenue side. That yellow bar in the middle is our 2022 budget. You'll see we're at about $5.8 million for the general fund revenue budget. That is up from 2020. It is up from 2021 as well. I anticipate as we get closer to the end of 2021, that will also rise and be a little closer to that $15 million mark. What's important here is that we are on our way towards recovery of that 2019 year that we keep using as our benchmark as we forget that 2020 happened in some of these financial trends. 2019 was one of our most financially successful years, especially in terms of revenues. So that is kind of always our target on how we get back on track to that. This does show that over the 5 years, those revenues are steadily increasing. We've taken out and smoothed some of those development revenues and are assuming an average number of development units to be coming in each year, thus reducing some of those valleys. So happy to show an ongoing revenue recovery of about 2 to 3% in those outer years as well. Sales tax is a major driving force of that general fund revenue. Our 2022 budget is about $8.6 million of sales tax revenue. Following the last graph, happy to show also positive trends as that sales tax continues to grow. We'll talk about some of the factors for why those numbers are nearing a $10 million mark in those outer years. So that budget is a 7.2% increase over the current year budget. Healthy increase, you wonder. We are continuing to see month over month sales tax collections that are ahead of budget, are ahead of 2020 at this time, and back on track to that 2019 level. Our base and our online sellers are ones that we watch pretty closely. We continue to see about a 2.5% increase each month in our base. Taxpayers, we are hoping and projecting out that that continues through next year. The online sellers there is the big one. So if you'll notice 20% increase in online sellers, it is not a typo. We are seeing significant growth, not only in the number of taxpayers, but also the dollars that are being remitted to us month over month for those online sales delivered into Evans residents. So all that online shopping, thank you. It's paying off. It's helping to offset. Right? Nobody needs to say how many times the delivery truck was on your street. But it's nice to see those, and what we're seeing is that that category has significant opportunity for growth, for that to continue for some time. The state is continuing to work on their sales tax system that encourages nationwide taxpayers to file once through the state, and that remits funds to the local municipalities. That got off to a slow start, but we are continuing to get information from them. They're doing more marketing. They're doing what they can to make that taxpayers too. So hoping that really takes off and helps to increase that. We're projecting a 5% increase in the industries of storefront retail, our convenience stores, and industrial. And I wanted to point out 5% for industrial might not make everybody feel so comfortable. Please remember that that's on top of our current budget. So we had reduced that so that our budget was not reliant on industrial sales tax coming in. We are continuing to see larger dollars come through each month as well, hoping that trend continues. 10% improvement in motor vehicle and restaurant categories is what we're currently seeing. Our motor vehicle, we kind of wait each month for that to turn down, but prices of new and used vehicles continues to rise. We'll see when an inventory shortage might halt those numbers a little bit too, but at this point we're continuing to see growth and continuing to see increase. We do also ensure that our Greeley sales tax that we receive on the line of demarcation is consistent with our storefront projections. That's held to be a fairly decent indicator over the past budgets. And otherwise continue to watch this each month as well. So if we see something drastically different than what our trends show today, then obviously we'll let council know if there's reason for change there. Other major revenues in the general fund, just wanted to point out a few here. You'll see that second line is property tax. So we are expecting an increase in property tax for next year, which is good news. We're in a very fortunate position here at Evans that many entities are not. Many are seeing and projecting property tax decreases over the next 2 years related to oil and gas values. So one more good thing here for Evans. Other taxes continues to go up next year as well. That's primarily our use tax on building. Also includes our severance tax from oil and gas. So hopefully that comes back as well. We did see a decline this year from last year's production. We're at a low point there and we'll continue to rise from here as well. Our intergovernmental at about 1.7 million, that stays fairly consistent. That is where the Greeley IGA sales tax revenue is shown. And we have a larger amount in our miscellaneous. Our neighborhood code enforcement continues to do a great job in bringing in some abatement revenues when necessary to help the city stay clean and attractive. We're bumping up that revenue consistent with what we're seeing. We're also receiving more interest income, trying to put that money to work and showing an increase there in these revenues. So again, same slide here. Those factors are what brings us to the $15.8 million of general fund revenue for next year. If we look at that on a summary level for the general fund, you'll notice we'll start this coming year with about $11.5 million fund balance at the beginning of the year. Our revenues are planned to exceed our expenditures by about $920,000. We're showing $1 million of planned use of fund balance per council's request at the previous meeting to fund playground replacements at neighborhood parks. So showing that as a one-time use of those reserve funds of the general fund. What that means is without adding anything else into the budget at this point and having that base budget, we would dip into our fund balance by about $76,000. In the outer years, you'll see that net results line showing about $700,000 to $800,000 of room revenues that are exceeding our expenditures in those outer years that would be driving up our ending fund balance each year. As I mentioned, we did have a number of requests from departments as our leadership team worked together to identify the highest needs and priorities in our departments. We did have a number of requests for this year to the total of about $1.2 million. And it might be easier. I have a handout. Thank you, Randy. I have a handout here that goes into a little bit more detail about what some of these positions are. Did you want these or do you want them?
I will.
Okay.
I'll pick up here for a minute and talk about some of the needs. The first point is that our total needs and it's very small font.
I know, I'm sorry. I tried to get it on one page. Maybe it's easier just to focus on the slide.
They're in bigger letters with less detail on the screen there, but I will try to talk through some of these things. When we bring this for your consideration, we'll bring it so that these are larger font. But I think the big point is that when we put our heads together to talk about the unmet needs that we have, we kind of had a list of about $1.2 million. The list that we have for you tonight, this is what can be afforded in the budget that we showed you and the unallocated revenues that we're projecting for the next 5 years. And that total is $721,000. So I'll just kind of hit some of the high points here so you're familiar with the requests. If you have any questions at the end, of course, we'll be glad to spend some time on these. As always, our highest priorities is with our police department and our maintenance operations. As council's aware, we are currently authorized for 36 positions, sworn positions in our police departments. In 2020, we had gotten that number, the authorized number. When I say authorized, that's budgeted up to 38. But we had to then scale that back to 36 with the budget reductions that we made in 2020. So this first one would return the authorized number back to 37, not quite 38, and it would help us then start to make some inroads on that traffic enforcement, which had been the highest priority for those 2 additional positions back then. Second item here is for an additional street maintenance technician, which is actually another restored spot from a couple years ago. This is one that we had to pull back on, eliminate, and this one we really need, because at this point we have just a short, 3 or 4 person crew for streets, and they're having to share their crew with another crew, stormwater often. And with this position restored, then that streets crew, which does a lot of things, but among them is that pothole work, they'll be able to work more independently and get more work done without relying on other crews and then compromising that work. The next one is very important to us, although it's a little more behind the scenes. The management analyst position is one that we had a couple years ago and just is able to bring a ton of work. This is a professional level position that has the responsibility for doing a lot of research, analysis, writing, preparation of council items. If you think back, much of the Tuscany Water Project was, with all of that modeling, all of that costing was put together by the management analyst. As we look at next year's, that's just one example. As we look at next year's priorities, two of our biggest things are updating and renewing our water treatment with our water treatment agreement with the city of Greeley, and also advancing the wastewater treatment plan and project. Those will fall heavily on Randy's shoulders. Randy has also had to take on a lot of management program development work at a level that makes it hard for him to focus on those large projects. I can say the same thing for me when it comes to, an example is the hunting program from this year. That took a lot of time and took us away from some things that if we had this management analyst level type position would have made it easier to develop those programs and keep some of the senior managers focused more on the work that we need them to do. Deputy City Clerk, this is one that's really would shore up an area where we have some risk. As we saw when our last city clerk left the city, we didn't have anybody trained for the technical work involved, not only in managing city council meetings and agendas, but also on keeping up with our public records requests, our liquor licensing, our cemetery management. We had to really scramble, and it really took a toll on some of our other operations. We looked around this year and discovered that many cities of our size do have a deputy city clerk or something similarly titled to give some backup and redundancy to the clerk's position, in addition to helping with many of the council meeting issues that we're now dealing with. Technology that you've seen April, who is actually a human resources technician helping out with at our council meetings. It hasn't been ideal. She's been a total trooper and learned, but this would help us to shore that up. Next one on the list is a park maintenance technician. This is the one that we also had funded in 2020 that we had to pull back on. This is the one that we had envisioned bringing a little more expertise around arborist work, tree management work, also looking at all of our flowers, but really that tree work, developing more of a trimming schedule and replanting program, all of those things that now we do in a much more ad hoc way when we have when we can. If we could hire this spot, would bring that expertise, as well as other mowing and just basic parks technician work. Recreation specialist, you'll see that the cost of this one, which, by the way, the cost for all of these are fully loaded with benefits and also some equipment in some cases. The rec specialist, this is one that has been a part-time role. We've had great success with our part-time recreation specialists, but it's time that we fulfill the vision, the plan that we had when Brian Stone left, which was to promote and keep our two program managers, Kristen and Jen, whom you know, but then also to bring back another full-timer to bring some horsepower and support for the other operations, for all the scheduling work that we do, for all the management, the working with the parents, the coaches, all of that work that has to go on. We've been able to cobble that together, especially during 2020 when our programming was so low, but this rec specialist job, bringing this back to 40 hours, will help us to have more solid, more continuity with that function and keep those rec services strong. The next one is an HR director slash manager. This is one that I firmly believe that we need. We have an organization of over 100 employees, and currently we have 2.5 FTE dedicated. This is a role that a couple years ago I had promoted the then Human Resources Director to the role of Admin Services Director because we needed more citywide attention to some issues, more support for some departments. And at that point, we wanted to try having that individual both do the admin services duties and also continue as the HR director. And I'll be the first to take responsibility and say, I'll always try to stretch us. But in this case, there's just too much ongoing human resources work and things that we have to keep an eye on, programs that we have to develop that we haven't been able to develop, as well as on the admin services director side. An example of this need that will resonate with council is, for the past several years, I have hoped that we could do a real detailed review of all of our service agreements and contracts citywide. That's a big project that is probably too much for the finance department, too much for anyone to do. And we really need someone in that kind of an overarching admin services role to take that by, the reins and lead those kinds of projects that will really shore up the internal security of a lot of our ongoing services, as well as support 3 or 4 departments that need that kind of support and just coordination on the admin services side. The next one is not in FTE, but it is a need that we have, and given the dollar value, we wanted to bring it to you. We need to replace the vehicle that we use mostly in the summertime for our day camp. It's fondly known by the us now because it's old and smells like cheese. So this vehicle, though, has, I might ask Randy to jump in and just speak to the kind of cost to benefit that we have of keeping it, and then we can speak also to how this is paid for.
Sure, and I'll let Kristen chime in with any specific details as we go, but this is a vehicle, it's a 2006 model year. It gets used about 2.5 months a year and is in very poor shape. It has relatively low mileage, under 40,000 miles on it, but needs about $17,000 worth of repairs. Some things to very specific, very necessary safety systems like the brakes and the transmission. So $17,000 for repair. As I mentioned, it's a 2006 vehicle, has about an estimated value of $7,000. So we're not proposing to spend that kind of money on a vehicle that's that old, but instead would like to go out on the market. There are vendors that offer vehicles that are safety checked and well maintained. Would make those available to us on a 3-month basis during the day camp. I'm not a vehicle expert, but those that are tell us that that's one of the worst things you can do with a vehicle is use it intensely for a short period of time and then put it on the shelf, leave it parked for months. Every system on that starts falling apart. And this one certainly has. So rather than coming to you with a $60,000 or $70,000 replacement request, we'd like to go with a lease. That lease is right at that $13,000 a summer rate. It allows us to bring 15 more campers on than we could otherwise without it. We'd be limited to 25 campers, but the day camp is authorized to have up to 40. So to get to that 40, we need a vehicle. Those 15 additional campers will bring in about $30,000 during the summer, more than covering this. Propose that to you as a safer, more economical model going forward. During COVID, everything, all of our agreements with the school district kind of was on hold. It is a possibility. They have not indicated that they're going to start that back up again for next summer. But before we did anything else, we would absolutely check in with them. Right. They're struggling with their own driver and vehicle issues, but it's certainly something, yeah, we would love to explore that. It'd be a great partnership.
There you go.
Well, I can finish this up and questions. So next item, another thing we had eliminated for some cost savings that has proven that we now know that we can probably cover all this cost based on our experience is that we'd like to reinstate our part-time code enforcement program for the summertime. This is especially helpful when we're in full weed mitigation and trash mitigation season. Having these part-timers helps us to get a lot more enforcement done and also allows the 2 full-timers that we have to focus on some of the more complex enforcement cases that we have because those take a lot of focus and a lot of time, and also continue building out as council's seen some of the other neighborhood services programs that are in the works. Next one is for on-call traffic, a traffic engineering consultant. This is one that we also believe will largely cover its costs from time to time, especially when development trends and pace picks up. We know that we're going to have city-specific things, additional traffic issues and dynamics that we want to have explored so that we know that when we approve a project, it's going to work. And having this on-call traffic engineering consultant will give us that resource. These fees based on a given project can be charged back to the developer, so we can recover most of those fees back through the developer. And then finally, I believe council is aware that we have had a part-time emergency management coordinator, and that position, we had to eliminate that during 2020. Thankfully, our safety and risk manager, who has a whole full-time job around risk management and safety with our departments, has been kind of keeping us going through the COVID time, coordinating with the county, coordinating with the state on documentation and updates and all those things. But we feel that it's really probably appropriate given the risks that Evans has, particularly due to flooding, but also other things, for us to have this part-time position to continue our FEMA coordination and also our emergency operations plan updates and training with our staff and also with neighborhoods. So that's the end of the list that we're recommending for inclusion in the 2022 budget. It comes to $721,650 fully loaded with all of the related costs. I won't take the time now to talk about the additional needs that we have, but I think as we are able to find additional savings in our budget, we'll be able to add that next police officer back and also advance some of the other goals that we have, hopefully throughout next year. With that, I'll turn it back to Jackie, and we'll finish the presentation and then look forward to questions.
Absolutely. So what that looks like on a financial basis, if we go back to that 5-year plan with those $721,000 of costs added into our budget, the 2022 line there highlighted in the middle, our net operating results, instead of it being close to $800,000, or close to 900, excuse me, is about $202,000, where our revenue still exceeds our expenditures for the year. Still showing that $1 million of planned use of fund balance for the playground replacements means that for the 2022 year, I keep doing that, we will dip into our ending fund balance shy of $800,000. So we'll begin the year at about 11.5 million, end the year at 10.7. What that means in the outgoing years is that the costs that we're recommending included in the next year's budget are sustainable through that 5-year. We have positive net operating results in all 5 years that we're showing here, and keeps our ending fund balance relatively unchanged at about that $10.6 to $10.9 million amount. We did have a number of additional requests in this process that were not related to the general fund. They are also included in the 2022 budget before you tonight. So the road tax fund is where we're recommending spending. You didn't want to.
Yeah,
Do you want to?
I can just
Sorry.
take these. So now that our maintenance budget and also our road expansion budget is heated up to the level that it has, it's time for us to bring on an additional inspector. Those inspections that we do and the way that, like, you know, Leon, the way he works with those contractors really helps us to ensure the quality of our street maintenance that you're seeing happen all over town. This position, bringing someone on, I believe this again has benefits and equipment, probably vehicle.
I don't think
Or,
there's a
no,
vehicle, but
okay.
there's significant computer and software costs for this position.
Yeah, would help us to backfill, to bring some more capacity to make sure that those projects stay high quality, and also kind of give a nod to some succession planning, because our current inspector Leon has lots and lots of knowledge of the city, and we really need to start to build some backup for Leon as we look forward. Wastewater fund, with the original wastewater treatment plant, we had the plans had included one more wastewater maintenance tech that we have not yet filled. Now that we're up and fully running up to speed and conducting all of the preventive maintenance work and doing all the work at the wastewater treatment plant, it's time, based on work and capacity, to authorize that last wastewater maintenance tech. And then finally, this is a result of storm drainage jetting is a result of some success that we have. The staff this year, and now I think for a couple of years, we have 3 positions authorized in our stormwater unit. And they had a vacancy, and they took some of that vacancy and money savings and put it to work for more contract storm jetting. And it's made a big difference for us this year. And what we'd like to do now is bring on that, be able to hire that last authorized position, which would help us to do more street sweeping, more of our stormwater line cleaning, all of that, and also keep going with the storm line jetting. These recommendations would also fit within each of the funds in which they live, given the ongoing funding sources there.
For that. Also included in this year's budget are supplies and services that we talk about that really funds the bulk of where departments, professional services, training, office supplies, all those things live. We're projecting a 3% increase in the 2022 budget over 2021, and not just due to a blank inflationary lump. Rather, the 3 of us met with, I think, every department to really go through what the department needed. Many had savings that they were able to give back for use in other areas now that operations have changed from COVID, and the way that we do business is different. Others had some significant increases that we needed to plan for. The bulk of that 3% is related to those items there on the right. So we do expect to have increases in our property and casualty insurance premiums. Rates continue to go up for everybody, so we need to make sure that's included. We have some significant cost increases for IT. So we have additional staff, that's additional licensing. We have new programs all the time that need security. We're always trying to further our email security platforms, anything we can do to make sure that the information that we have here at the city is secure. So they're continuing to look at new things that often cost some money. And then, as Jim mentioned, the on-call traffic engineer, as that's not a staff position, that's not included in what you'll see is total payroll costs. Rather, it's included in this supplies and services. So it's one of our most significant increases there. In terms of personnel costs citywide, we're at $12.5 million for all salaries and benefits for all city employees across the board. I do like to show these pie graphs each year just to make sure that if these change at all. They really don't. You would think I put them up every year and don't even look at them. We really do run about a 75-25 split from our cost of our salary to our benefits. We do still provide a very attractive benefit package. Hopefully that's helping us to keep very good staff here as well. That proportion there stays pretty consistent. Of that $12.5 million, 89% is representative of general fund employees, and 11% are the water, wastewater, and storm drainage employees. Just to call out a couple of changes for this year, the classification and compensation increases that council wanted to ensure funding for the recommendations of that study for next year. That's included in there. We're also budgeting a 4.5% merit increase. We heard council. We do have structure in place to award high-performing employees up to a 5% merit. That will be very well received. But we know in all reality, not every employee will be 5%. Some will still get less than 3, 4, 5. So for budget purposes, we're showing that as a 4.5% increase. Hopefully that holds true for this year. And then we also have the requested position addition. So of the $721,000, $677 will be loaded into the payroll budgets in those respective departments. Also in the general fund are a couple of items we'd like to fund next year in terms of asset management. This is exciting. This means we're in a good place with our budget when we're bringing back room in the budget to do necessary asset management costs rather than. So this is something that I'm hopeful we can talk about over the next few years as a significant investment of the general fund too. There are a long list of items that will need to be addressed. For this next year, we have just shy of $100,000 of the highest priority items. The first one there is replacement of weight and cardio equipment in the rec center. So they've identified probably over the next 3 or 4 years, roughly $14,000 that could help with a handful of machines as well as some selected weight equipment. They're in the process now of doing kind of a inventory listing to identify the pieces of equipment that are the highest priority need at this point. So I can't tell you exactly what machine will be replaced. That'll also be determined when they're able to bundle a couple of equipment purchases at one time, that sort of thing. So $14,000 will make a significant change in the rec center's equipment there. We have carpet replacements, and that's both in our facilities and our recreation areas. So basically the southern part of this building, in some of the rec rooms, some of the spaces that are rented out, as well as in the hallway. We'll kind of see how far that money goes to replace the carpet down on the south end that hasn't been done for a number of years. And then we also have some painting of those spaces as well. The rental spaces kind of need that freshening. You know, we want people to feel good about coming in, having their events here, and a fresh coat of paint in some of those rooms in the rec center will go a long way as well. For parks, they've identified a new replacement, not a new, riding mower. So one of the big 48-inch wide turning mowers for the fields. They have one that is in need of some pretty significant repairs, more cost effective to probably put that money invested in a piece of equipment that will last for a number of years. And this is all in the general fund again, just shy of $100,000 for next year. We've mentioned a couple of times our reserves for the general fund. We do anticipate ending next year just shy of $11 million in that fund balance after all of these things are included that we've been mentioning. Per council's direction, we are still holding a 50% target reserve of the prior year's operating expenses. So we know just over $8 million we're required to hold of that fund balance. And shaded in the green there, you'll see a reminder of why we hold those. In terms of sudden economic downturn, hopefully we wouldn't need to use some of those funds to continue operations. If we had a loss of a major sales tax generator, if, heaven forbid, there was a natural disaster again, that would allow us to start to react to that until other forms of assistance would be available, as well as allowing council to act on a development or an investment opportunity that may arise. On top of that, we're setting aside $2 million as council's requested to hold for design of a new police facility as we look at funding opportunities and how that might work. Having that money set aside for that purpose could help us too in terms of getting additional financing for construction or lessening the debt service that we may take out for the construction of that building if we're able to utilize some of those reserves. So all of those things incorporated, we would still have an available fund balance of $618,000 on top of all of those. As we move on to the enterprise funds, in our water fund, and again, I haven't mentioned this, but we do need to still run through all of these through water and sewer board. So we're at a crunch point of the year where we need to have a budget presented to City Council before October 15th. We are still waiting for some information to finalize water, sewer, and storm rates, but all of the budget that you'll see in 2022 before you now is based on these assumptions. So if anything major changes at this point, then we do have time to address that, discuss it before it were to be implemented at the beginning of the year. We have heard from Greeley to expect a 3% increase in water treatment rates for 2022. That is significantly lower than what we've had over the last handful of years. We were at a 6% increase for the 2021 year. So happy that 3% feels a little bit closer to what our inflationary costs usually are. So our budget, the revenue rates, as well as our treatment costs in the 2022 budget are based on that increase. We are continuing to fund water conservation efforts. Again, that was something new in the 2021 year. Wanted to point that out as something that is continuing as a priority in the water fund. And similar to the general fund, we are holding reserves in the water fund for future projects. The 2022 budget will end with about $5.3 million, and we are showing those reserved for major maintenance needs, our participation in the NISP project, potential needs for Greeley system expansion as well. Next year's capital projects, we've talked about these in detail, but a reminder, we will have a significant investment in NISP this next year. That's programmed in, as well as the water fund's participation in Idaho Street infrastructure improvements, as well as 37th Street Phase 1. And as it was mentioned earlier tonight, we will also be working on the water treatment agreement going forward for the City of Evans. That'll be a significant project for next year's water fund.
We don't know if we'll need that $100,000, but we may benefit, since this is so important, in hiring some external expertise for water strategy and kind of current practices to make sure we optimize that agreement.
Absolutely. In the wastewater fund, less of a revenue increase here and rate increase. 1.9% is the consumer price index inflationary amount for this current year. That's consistent actually with the percentage amount that was implemented for 2021 year. So we anticipate wastewater rates at this point of that 1.9%. We are still in kind of a final stages with our consultant on the rate study review for wastewater rates, hoping to have recommendations here next week. We'll be reviewing those so that we can take that through Water and Sewer Board and the City Council for what those recommendations are. If that changes significantly, then obviously we'll scrap the 1.9% and replace it with whatever those recommendations might be, whatever council's wishes are on that. But at this point, we've at least programmed in those inflationary, both costs and revenue. We know we're also holding cash balance in this wastewater fund, similar to the water fund, for future capital projects. Our 2022 budget, that ending cash balance will decrease from $10.6 million down to 7.3. We do have a significant project for the design for the wastewater expansion in next year's budget that will use up some of that cash balance. And so holding some of that for future capital needs as well for wastewater. Just to remind you, $4.5 million is what we're planning for right now to start that design process. Also have a couple of annual maintenance, sewer line, and solids handling, dewatering projects. We'll be working on a wastewater utility plan necessary for next year. I think we've talked about that a little bit as well. And we do continue to hold a little bit of fund balance for plant equipment, building replacement, as we look at what that expansion need might be. In the storm drainage fund, really our focus here is working on the east side storm drainage projects. And so our 2022 budget ending cash balance goes down to about $900,000 from about 1.5. So we did get awarded all of the revenue, that $8.6 million. We'll be drawing that down as we spend it on construction. On the revenue side, similar to wastewater at this point, projecting a 1.9% rate increase for inflationary costs help to cover the ongoing operational costs of the storm drainage fund. I do not anticipate that that would change. We don't have any other pending information on storm that would change user rates for storm drainage at this point. Talked about that big project on each side, and the storm drainage also will have a participation in Idaho Street improvements capital project to be undertaken in the next 2 years. I know we're watching the time, so I'll make sure we leave time for questions. In terms of our non-operating funds, I just wanted to point out this. So this is non-general and then non-enterprise funds. This is kind of everything else. You'll see our fire and school impact funds are showing the development revenue impact fees coming in for those funds that would be fully dispersed out to those two agencies. The capital expenditure line is probably the most notable in this. So you'll see street impact, park impact, conservation trust, and then in our road funds as well, CIP streets, the food tax, and the road tax. So I think we have $9.5 million of capital projects that are being funded out of these funds. So pretty significant road projects, putting these dollars to work on that food tax and that road tax for this next year. All the funds are maintaining healthy fund balances and only decreasing for those capital projects. Nothing too notable for any of these non-operating funds, other than we are modeling similar revenue processes as we are to the general fund in terms of conservative budgeting for our development on those impact fees. So all of that methodology that we apply to one fund, we apply to all of them. Our capital improvement plan has, I think, remained unchanged from what we discussed last week. I do have handouts of this that you can actually read if you'd like to take a look at that. The addition of that $1 million in the general fund for playground replacements. So that brings our total capital projects for next year's budget to over $18 million. So that is significant. I always look to see if Mark sweats when I say that number out loud. It's a lot, yeah. You know, and as I looked back at the budget books in prior years this morning, you know, we were at that $20 million amount in 2019 when we were back to a state of healthy revenues. We felt like we were, you know, really at a capacity level where we were, you know, we were really furthering the city. So I think it's one more indicator that we're well on our way to recovery. We're investing in some very significant projects for the community. So next steps of our budget. Obviously tonight, looking at the operating and capital budget, it will come to City Council for consideration at first reading and public hearing on the 19th. And then second reading to follow. We'll continue to monitor our financial results each month. And, you know, we'll obviously let council know if we see anything problematic or worth discussing that would alter some of our assumptions in next year's budget. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Let's see if something.
Mention, give a little thanks to our finance committee who spent time with us last week and worked through a lot of this materials and helped us to sharpen up our message in a couple places. So thank you for that. That's all we have, Mayor. We'll be glad to answer questions.
So,
You can pass.
I'll just make a quick comment. Questions here now. One of the things I would like to do, maybe we can also use that. The deputy city clerk thing. Some help there. Also, I was thinking of the definitely less.
possibly.
One part-time year-round.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the neighborhood services, part-time enforcement, it is funding for two, but they're seasonal. So come on board, ideally in April, depending on who they are, some of them may have to return to August, but the funding is there to go April through October, which is really the part-time.
We can clarify that when we bring this back to you. Thanks.
Okay.
It might be more one for half a year or two if it was a shortened season,
Depending
depending
on
on
how long
who
each
we
works,
have
but
and
it's a pool of funds. We hand that manager and say, go
right.
Go use it.
Go in.
No. And one, if I may, Mayor, just on the first points, we'll bring back some solutions on that police officer. But when I was talking with Rick about it, the way we're looking at the hiring market for officers now, we're at about 30. And so we thought we probably have a little bit of time. And as you'll see, that police officer position is our highest priority after these. And we have, as we've been saying all along, especially if we're able to reduce our costs somewhere else, like fire, IGA, we've been saying that will be important for bringing back the other police officers and some of the other needs that we have. We're hopeful at this point that with a little bit of time there, we'll be able to resolve one and have a funding solution for that. So
I didn't realize we were currently funding I think, called assistant city clerk. But that's, I don't know when they eliminated it, but power for that.
I like these additional recommendations. I think they're great. I think they're needed. And I definitely agree that we need to lease a bus for the kiddos, just safety first, especially, and we don't want it to smell like cheese for the kids. But I mean, I do agree that yes, we do need a deputy, a city clerk, an HR director or manager. All of these definitely, I mean, are needed. Police officers, of course, being the highest priority. Every one of these will definitely assist our city moving forward. And I think now with things kind of looking better, it's definitely needed for us to continue to do what we like to see, the growth that's happening, our priorities, just to help us with all that. So yes, I'm for this.
I'm 100% for. I wish we had the extra $500,000 to add. Taking on more than technically what their position. And I understand 100%. Because you're thinking, well, I'm covering two positions, I'm only getting paid for one. I get that 100%. I say the more help we can get so we can do the better. Not so much so that they leave us. I say the more the merrier. Everything else too. I just want to say. More. For me, I have to
publicly sit here and ask questions, so I just wanted to know.
She did.
I throw my trust in you two. What else?
Council?
Okay.
You did.
We have a few minutes. Does anyone have anything for council discussion? Appeal the Thursday, now we get. No, we are discussing emissions. 19. Moving in, developers will build housing near, trees coming pretty quick. One of the things we as an NPO ask.
I would like to add to that. So I went to the housing dedication for the Atmos Energy and Greeley Habitat for Humanity collaboration. So it was the first ZNE home, which is a zero net energy home in the state and many other states. So that is it's monumental. The simple fact that the city of Evans has a zero net home. And the great thing about it is the simple fact that we have partnerships with different energy entities that collaborated together to showcase this home. So in essence, it's stating no specific entity is separated from this project. They utilize gas in an extremely efficient way to show sustainability and how gas is going to move forward. So gas, electricity, solar, so all these different types of entities working together in collaboration to show that it's possible, that we can transition to a cleaner a way of doing things, and also to reduce greenhouse emissions moving forward, and also to slow down our carbon footprint and also assist us with less energy, but also producing more energy and paying less for these specific types of utilities. So I think it was a great event. I mean, there was a lot of people there, a lot of media. Mayor Gates was there, city council members. I know Fred Neal was there, as well as myself and Jim. Many community members were there, and it was just a great welcoming to this project and a great showcase. And the simple fact that it's in Evans, I was proud. So I was excited.
I probably need to steal some thunder. Well, their hard work and town hall.
I would like to add to that. I am so proud of them too. I mean, everyone. I think Heritage Day, considering that we had to scale it down, it was phenomenal. Everyone had a great time. Everyone had fun. It was just positive feedback. So thank you for all your hard work. Wife as well. Scott's wife did amazing.
Oh, well, I can't remember how many people I've told at the council about the gentleman's wife had come. I was talking to him, not realizing his wife, and he stated that when I told him, the fireworks cost about $1,000 a minute, he said, "Well, it was money well spent." And I thought that was the best comment that we could have from the residents. It's something small, lights.
Wait, can I add one thing? I forgot. So I just wanted to say that October 16th, I have been awarded the 2021 Outstanding Women of Weld County because of government leadership. It is open to the public. You guys are all welcome to come and join us. It's going to be at the Union Colony Civic Center. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Oh, all right, we have 5 minutes.